find out what's happening this week in the world of books this and every Monday. Stay tuned! Welcome to Biblio Happy Hour's Biblio News segment, where we will be sharing new releases for this week, other titles to look out for in future, bookstore events, and what's trending. Before I get started, I just wanted you to know that you can listen to our off-the-cuff discussions, get our monthly top-shelf new release recommendations, behind-the-scenes content, perks, and more over on our Patreon page. Patreon is a super easy way to support the show, plus it helps us to grow and embark on new and amazing projects for both the book and bookstore community. So check out the details over at patreon.com/bibliofinder. And without further ado, here's what's new for the week of Monday, November 4th. Before I get started with the books that are new this week, I'd like to share with you 3 major events to note on your calendar for the month of November. Miami Book Fair, November 17th to 24th. This annual festival is organized by Miami-Dade College, and they will have more than 250 publishers and booksellers participating. There will also be special features like antiquarians showcasing first editions and original manuscripts. National Book Awards 5 Under 35 ceremony on November 18th. Honorees are writers from around the world under the age of 35 who have published their first and only book of fiction within the last 5 years. The 70th Annual National Book Awards on November 20th. On that day, the finalists for the literary prize will be announced. Now, I'll be mentioning some of the books that will be available on bookshelves during the week of November 4th. From Penguin Books, The Power of Noonchi by Yoonhee Hong. The Korean sixth sense for winning friends and influencing people is Noonchi, which helps you connect with others so you can succeed in everything from business to love. Also from Penguin Books, The Earthquake Bird by Susanna Jones. Soon to be a major Netflix film, is a haunting psychological thriller set in Tokyo, probing deep into the mind of a murder suspect. New in paperback from Random House is The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. Also new in paperback is The Adults by Caroline Holtz. New from Ballantine Books is A Christmas Gathering by Anne Perry. A Cold Case adds an extra chill to the holiday season as best-selling author Anne Perry whisks readers to an English country house for a Christmas of secrets, soul-searching, and forgiveness. New from Riverhead Books is On Swift Horses by Shannon Pufau. A lonely newlywed and her wayward brother-in-law follow divergent and dangerous paths through the post-war American West. New in paperback from Soho Press is What Burns by Dale Peck. New from Doubleday Books, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is a timeless love story set in a secret underground world, a place of pirates, painters, lovers, liars, and ships that sail upon the starless seas. Also new from Doubleday is Sandworm, a new era of cyber war and the hunt for the Kremlin's most dangerous hackers, by Andy Greenberg. From Wired senior writer Andy Greenberg comes the true story of the desperate hunt to identify and track an elite team of Russian agents bent on digital sabotage. New from Everyman's Library, Berlin Stories by Philip Hensher. New in paperback from Vintage Books is Elsie Come Home by Suzanne Conley. New from Counterpoint Press is The Revisioners, and we have the author Margaret Wilkerson Sexton here with us to share all the details. Margaret, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. So your new book, The Revisioners, will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling right now?
I'm really excited. I mean, I've been counting down to this day for about a year. I can't believe it's finally here. I'm super excited to be able to discuss the book with readers. That's the best part for me. I remember with a kind of freedom, I couldn't believe it. It was my goal obviously to be published and in my dream, but I didn't know how it would feel to actually have readers weigh in on characters that were so private for so long. And to hear their opinions and to hear their emotional connections with the characters and with the story. It was so fulfilling. It was the most fulfilling part. So I'm excited to do that again with these characters.
So tell us about your novel. Tell us about The Revisioners.
So The Revisioners tells the story of Josephine, who in 1924 is a former enslaved woman and former sharecropper. And she's widowed, but she has, through a stroke of luck, become a landowner. She owns a 300-acre farm, and she's flourishing. She's grateful because of the resources she has and the friendships and the relationships, but also because she vividly remembers and chronicles in this story her escape from slavery. So there's always this juxtaposition going of what it used to be like when she wasn't free and what it's like now. However, this is the year that a white woman moves next door. And the white woman, is younger than Josephine. Josephine's in her 70s. This woman's in her 20s. This woman is lonely. She's not as secure as Josephine, and she attempts to forge this relationship with this older woman. And at first, Josephine is hesitant for reasons we understand because of what we know about history. But ultimately, she acquiesces, and they form this cautious friendship that's upended once Josephine learns that the woman is a member of the Klan. And then many, many, many generations later, Josephine's great, great, great granddaughter, Ava, is a biracial woman. She's come upon some hard times financially, and she decides to move in with her white grandmother in this wealthy uptown New Orleans neighborhood in a mansion, essentially. And it's supposed to be a win-win. She'll help her grandmother whose health is failing. Her grandmother will help her with her cash flow. And at first it goes that way. At first it's pretty smooth, and then the grandmother's behavior becomes increasingly erratic and even racist, and Josephine's and Ava's storylines threaten to converge.
So Boz, with the handle at the Journey of My Books over on Instagram, would like to know how many pages were in your first draft, because she feels you told such an intricate and tightly woven story in under 300 pages.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. The same. I can't write a long book. I keep trying. I don't know why I keep trying, but I have it in my mind that, a real book is 300 pages, and I just can't seem to make the 300 mark. So even in my drafts, they're usually about the same. It doesn't change. I don't know if that's because I started out as a lawyer.
Right.
So I don't know if it's that training that has made my books so spare. I don't know. But I just I think of it like, this is the message I want to get across. And these are the scenes that are going to support that message getting across. And I don't really my mind doesn't even include other scenarios aside from those scenes that I'm using to tell this story.
So what would you say is your work schedule like when you're writing?
Well, when I'm actually writing and I'm not like marketing something.
Yes.
Because right now I'm not writing very much at all because the book is about to come out. But when I am writing, which is most of the time, I write about 4 hours a day.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter when. It could be. I have 3 small children, so it depends on my childcare. And so, but when I have childcare, that's when I work, and it's usually about 4 hours a day. And then when the book starts heating up, I'm like, if I know I want to submit it soon, or if I have edits due, it could be all day, and then it could be into the weekend. It heats up, But
right.
For the most part, like when it's just me actually writing the first draft, it'll just be like 4 hours a day.
Okay. Switching gears, what is your favorite childhood book?
Oh, maybe Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Yeah.
I love that book. It's very soothing for me. I guess I'd say it was one of the first times I saw myself reflected racially, but on the other hand, she had such a different life and it's a different timeline. I don't think I necessarily saw myself in the main character, but I guess what it is that's my subject matter. It's even the subject matter I choose to write about now. And then working with the racial theme.
Yes.
that's just me. That's just my wheelhouse. So I think there was a comfort there for me, and I still pull on that same wheelhouse basically when I'm working on my own stuff.
What is your favorite underappreciated novel?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. You hate to answer that question because I see my own book on an underappreciated list, and I was like, oh, I thought it was okay. I thought it did okay. I don't know. There's a book called Lot. It's a book of stories.
Yes.
I think his name is Brian Washington, the writer.
Yes.
But I don't want to say it was underappreciated. It was. I just feel like it was the best book, and I want to see more people reading it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, let's stick with that. You want to see more people reading a lot. I agree. Yeah. I read those stories.
Okay, you liked it too?
Oh, I loved it too. Yep. But getting back to your book, how do you want readers to feel after reading The Revisioners?
That's a really good question. I think with a kind of freedom, my first book, I think I wanted my readers to feel sad. I think I wanted the feeling that they had after finishing to match the gravity of the situation I was describing, which was, 3 generations of a Black family in which the trajectory was not upward but downward because of systemic issues in this country. And so that's a serious and sad issue, and I think I wanted the readers to feel that sadness. I feel differently about The Revisioners. I want people to feel hopeful. I want, especially Black people, I want Black readers to read this and feel like my ancestors' struggles were not in vain. And I'm not only inheriting their trauma, I'm inheriting their strength, their wisdom, their power. That's all living in me, and that's enabling me to rise to my potential and to meet any oppression I might face. I want the mainstream, I want other readers to think, oh, this is this issue, not just of white supremacy, but of the way in which white women benefit from white supremacy and help to enforce it. I want other readers to make connections between what we saw in 2016 and what's been going on for generations before. This is not the first instance in which there's been this huge gap between Black women and white women. And my intention is definitely not to guilt or shame anybody. I don't think that's helpful. I just want to open the door to have these conversations, to track history and to connect different patterns across history, and to start to facilitate healing.
Margaret, thank you so much for coming on the show. The Revisioners will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, November 5th.
Thank you.
Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. She shares more details about the concept of The Revisioners, the timeline she enjoyed writing the most, how publishing her first book changed her writing process, how long it took her to write the book, and she shares the new projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from Scribner Books, Checkpoint Charlie, The Cold War, the Berlin Wall, and the Most Dangerous Place on Earth by Ian McGregor. A powerful, fascinating, and groundbreaking history of Checkpoint Charlie, the famous military gate on the border of East and West Berlin, where the United States confronted the USSR during the Cold War. New from Simon & Schuster, Kiss the Girls and Make Them Cry, by Mary Higgins Clark. Also new from Simon & Schuster, The Harder You Work, the Luckier You Get, an entrepreneur's memoir, by Joe Ricketts. Joe Ricketts, founder of TD Ameritrade, shares the epic inside story of how a working-class kid from the Nebraska prairie took on Wall Street's clubby brokerage business, busted it open, and walked away a billionaire. New this week from Atria Books is The Family Upstairs, and we have the author Lisa Jewell here with us to share all the details. Lisa, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here. So I know this isn't your first rodeo, but The Family Upstairs will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling?
I am so excited. This was published in the UK in August, and it was an incredible publication over here. Everything went so well, and now knowing that I'm coming out again I can go through the excitement all over again, the second time in 1 year, and I've got a really good feeling about how this is going to be received once it hits the bookshelves in America. So I'm all goosebumpy and excited about it.
But tell us about your novel. Tell us about The Family Upstairs.
Okay, so The Family Upstairs is it's a very creepy, twisty-turny book. It's not your typical psychological thriller. There's a lot going on. It's told from the points of view of 3 different characters. So it's told from the point of view of a 25-year-old girl living just outside London who's just inherited an 8-bedroom mansion in Chelsea from her birth parents. She was adopted as a baby. But she's also found out there's a very dark backstory to this house and to the way she was found when she was a baby, including dead bodies in the kitchen. It's also a story of Lucy, who is in her late 30s. She's a single mum living in the south of France. She's currently homeless. She's been busking to support her family, and she's currently homeless because her violin is broken. So we meet her at a very low point in her life, and she gets a message on her phone saying the baby is 25. And suddenly is very keen to come back to London. But it's all a mystery until about a third of the way through the book, who she is and why she wants to come back to London. And then we'll also hear from Henry, who we first meet in 1988 when he's 10 years old, and he's living in an 8-bedroom mansion in Chelsea. And his life is very charmed, but his mother is about to invite somebody to come and live in the family home, and it's going to turn everything very dark very quickly. So you've got these 3 storylines which very, very slowly knit together to reveal some horrible, dark secret from the past.
Right. Okay. What inspired you to write The Family Upstairs? Give us some behind-the-scenes details.
Yeah, well, it's for me. I'm not a plotter, so I don't come to a book with a massive storyline in my head. I come to a book with a pair of very tiny seeds that I try and tend to and water and grow and hope they'll develop into something. And with this one, it was, I saw a woman in the south of France, funnily enough, about 2 summers ago when I was there on holiday, and she looked quite bedraggled, and she was dragging her 2 small children into the showers of a private beach club, very posh private beach club, and she was sort of looking over her shoulder, so she clearly wasn't a member and wasn't supposed to be taking her children in there. And I just couldn't stop thinking about this woman. She looked like she had a backstory. She looked like she was escaping from something. She looked like something had happened to her. And I just kept thinking about her. And I already had this idea that I wanted to write about a big house, because I love writing about big houses. Mm-hmm. So I sort of knitted her story together with this idea of a big house in Chelsea, and everything else just sort of grew organically from there. So yes, it was quite a random starting point, but it did manage to develop lots of roots and branches and turn into a proper book.
Alrighty. Beginning, middle, or end? What did you enjoy writing the most?
Oh, the beginning, without a doubt. I was so keen to write about this woman in the south of France, and I loved writing her scenes when she was living rough on the streets of Nice. I've never written a character in dire straits like that before, and I've certainly not set many of my books in foreign countries. They're nearly always set in the UK. Mm-hmm. So that was so exciting to write about, and then getting to know Henry, because I didn't really know what Henry's story was until I started writing him, and then he kind of told me what his story was. So the beginning of this book was just so much fun to write. The middle, not so much. The end was a total nightmare. The end was very painful because I hadn't really decided what was going to happen at the end until I had to write it. So yeah, the beginning was wonderful though.
Okay. And when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
I'm a real lazy bum. I try very hard to do nothing. I sit down a lot. I go on Facebook a lot. I've got a dog, thank goodness, so I have to walk her. So thank goodness for her for getting me off my bum and out of the house. I watch TV with my teenage daughter, loves watching TV with me. So we watch a lot of reality shows and what have you. No, I don't do anything. I haven't got any hobbies. I don't do any exercise. I don't really cook. I'm just a lump, basically.
Okay, so if you didn't write, what would you do for work?
If money was no object, I have a very good career in writing, and I've always managed to make enough money to have a good quality of life. But if money was no object, I have always had a fantasy about being a midwife. But if money was still an object, I think I'd like to work in publishing. I'd love to be an editor. I think I'd be a really good editor. So yeah, I'd either be a midwife or an editor.
Okay. And do you bookmark or dog ear your pages?
I do. What I will never do, though, I'm not fussy about books. But what actually upsets me on a physical level, that makes my stomach go into a knot, is people who bend the covers all the way round to the other side of the book. It's just like, then the book's not going to behave anymore. Then the book is out of shape, and the book is just going to sit there all boingy and curvy. And I do understand why people don't like dog earing pages, but at least it still looks like a book after you've done that. Whereas when you've curled the cover backwards, it's not even a book anymore.
Right.
I draw the line at that.
Okay. All right. Getting back to the family upstairs, who's your favorite character in the novel?
Without a doubt, it was Henry, because Henry, I didn't have any idea who he was. I just knew that I wanted a member of the household who'd been there during the terrible things that happened to tell the reader about the terrible things that happened. And I randomly decided that I would use a boy. And I thought, okay, here he is. And I literally just started writing him 30 seconds after I thought of him. Here he is. He's called Henry. He's 10 years old and he's a bit precocious and a bit strange. But I had no idea where he was going to go as a character, and he led me there. And there were so many things I didn't know about him before I started writing him, which he showed me, which is, as a writer, that's the most exciting thing that can happen, is for a character to show themselves to you so vividly that you don't even really have to do any work, because they do it all for you. So he was so much fun to write, because every time I wrote one of his chapters, I was learning something new, and he was brilliant.
And wrapping up, how do you want readers to feel after reading The Family Upstairs?
Oh, because it's got a very particular last chapter, so the reader will get to the second last chapter and think, oh, okay, everything's wrapped up nice and neat, and that's a false sense of security, because then I banged on this extra chapter. I actually banged it on a Friday night after 2 double vodkas, because I just knew that the book wasn't properly finished, and I knew I needed to do something else to properly finish it. And so I bunged this chapter on the end, and I hope that readers will feel completely wrong-footed and horrified and just like, oh no, now what? So yes, I hope that people will feel like they've had a very satisfying read, that everything they wanted to know has been answered, and all the storylines have been tied up neatly, but they are still left with a sense of dread and fear about what might happen next.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show. The Family Upstairs will be available in bookstores in the US on Tuesday, November 5th. Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with author Lisa Jewell. She shares more about her writing schedule, where she gets most of her writing done, how long it took her to write The Family Upstairs, how publishing her first handful of books changed her writing process, some advice for her younger writing self, and her favorite childhood books. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New this week from Gallery Books Scout Press is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. New from Gallery Books is Noel Street by Richard Paul Evans. Noel Street is a part of the Noel Collection series. In this book, author Richard Paul Evans shares a story of heart, loyalty, and hope as he explores the deeper meaning of the holiday season and asks what it truly means to love and forgive. Also from Gallery Books is Nash, the official biography, Nash Grier and Rebecca Pauley. This is the first ever book about Nash Grier, one of the biggest digital superstars in the world. Also from Gallery Books is The Deep, by Rivers Solomon, David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. The water-breathing descendants of African slave women tossed overboard have built their own underwater society and must reclaim the memories of their past to shape their future in this brilliantly imaginative novella inspired by the Hugo Award-nominated song The Deep from David Diggs' rap group Clipping. New this week from Little Brown is Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. New from Basic Books is Give Me Liberty, A History of America's Exceptional Idea by Richard Brokisser. Also from Basic Books is The Accursed Tower by Roger Crowley. Also from Basic Books, The Mutual Admiration Society by Mo Moulton. New from Hachette Books, The Witches Are Coming by Lindy West. In this funny cultural critique, the author of the critically acclaimed memoir and Hulu series Shrill exposes misogyny in the Me Too era. Also from Hachette Books, The Age of Anxiety by Peter Townsend. Pete Townsend explores the anxiety of modern life and madness in a story that stretches across 2 generations of a London family. New from Public Affairs, In That Time, Michael O'Donnell and the Tragic Era of Vietnam by Daniel H. Weiss. New from Running Press Adult, One on This Day, The Clothes That Made History by Kimberly Krishman Campbell. This stunning visual guide is a journey of discovery through fashion's fascinating history, one day at a time. New from Quercus Books is A Step So Grave by Catriona Macpherson. This is book 13 in a Dandy Gilver mystery. New from Tin House Books is Feed, a poetry collection by Tommy Pico. New from Catapult Books, Humiliation, a story collection by Paulina Flores. The 9 mesmerizing stories in Humiliation, translated from the Spanish by Man Booker International Prize finalist Megan McDowell, presents us with a Chile we seldom see in fiction. New this week from Catapult Books is The Crying Book, and we have the author Heather Christle here with us to share all the details. Heather, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is your first work of nonfiction, and it will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling?
Oh, very lucky. It's been really incredible seeing my friends, my family supporting me through this, my editor, my agent, all the folks at Catapult. This was a very vulnerable book to make, and I have felt deeply, deeply grateful for all of the people who have been with me through this time and up to this moment where it's finally going to be publicly out in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell our listeners, tell us about The Crying Book.
Well, it's, as its title says, a book that's all about crying. I started writing it years and years ago now. I had an idea that it would be fun to make a map of every place I'd ever cried, or if not fun, then at least interesting. And I just started writing, thinking that I was maybe writing a prose poem, because I usually write poems. And then it kept going, and I thought, well, maybe it's an essay, and that's okay. And then I found myself, the more I wrote, the more questions I had, the more I wanted to go and research and learn more about how tears connected with all the other parts of the world that I was thinking about. And eventually it became clear that it was a book. And it combines elements of memoir with biochemistry of tears, with representations of tears in art. It looks at the way that gender intersects with crying and makes tears be received differently in the world. It looks at the role of white women's tears in racist violence. And it looks at the moon, and it looks at gravity, and it looks at grief and the loss of my friend Bill and the process of becoming a mother. So it's a broad book, despite being fairly short.
Right, absolutely. What kind of research did you do, and how long did you spend researching before actually pulling everything together for The Crying Book?
I researched and wrote at the same time, and the research that is in the book is deeply interwoven with the act of writing the book as well. So I did a lot of different kinds of research. I spent time in archives. I spent time in the archives here in Atlanta at Emory University with the papers of Lucille Clifton. I was at UMass Amherst and looking at some papers of W.E.B. Du Bois. I went to the Philadelphia College of Physicians Library and looked at the papers of Silas Weir Mitchell. And then I also, on the less scholarly end of things, maybe went and looked for reviews of crying dolls on Amazon, and everything in between. And then, of course, I spoke with people, spoke with individuals about their crying, spoke with friends, and then chatted with a crying expert on the phone as well. So it took many, many forms. And of course, I was crying a lot as I was working on this book. So I was an active participant in direct research in that way as well.
Absolutely. Where do you get most of your writing and editing done?
Well, so this is kind of different or it's interesting to me, because we just moved to Atlanta, and I don't right now have my own room to write in, but we've set up a little corner of the kitchen with a very comfortable chair, which I'm very excited about because I got rid of my old writing chair because I got it from a thrift store a long, long time ago, and it was very comfortable except for it had pokey metal parts that would scratch you. And I have a kid, so it seemed eventually like it was time to let that go. So I'm very excited about my very new comfortable chair, and I sit there and I write on blank paper in a little corner of the kitchen in the mostly dark before everybody else is awake.
Okay. So when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Well, teaching. I'm teaching creative writing at Emory University, which is fantastic, and that's another reason to feel very, very lucky, I think, at the moment. I have these incredible colleagues who are just making beautiful work and are incredibly talented teachers and are kind and funny and interesting. I feel very, very lucky to be here. And spending time with them, apart just from teaching, but going to listen to them read or going and talking about what work they're making. And then I, spend time with my family. I exercise as much as I possibly can, but time has been tight for that lately. I try to go for a lot of walks. And right now I'm able to walk to bookstores, which is a great joy.
Okay, so on that note, because part of this podcast is always all about the bookstores, tell us some of your favorite bookstores. It doesn't have to be where you are now, but that would be great too. But tell us some of your favorite bookstores.
Yeah, well, yesterday I walked to Karis Books, which is about a mile away from my house. It's the oldest feminist bookstore in the country, I believe. And they're fantastic. They're absolutely great. We wandered in there a couple months ago when we first moved here, and it just so happened that they were having a children's book event, and I'm forgetting the name of the person who is the illustrator now, but they were working with kids on watercolor, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely lovely. And I love it when a bookstore has really intentional and thoughtful and interesting ways of bringing children and adults into that space. And I love getting to share bookstores with my kid. It's beautiful. And there's another great bookstore that's more focused on kids. Downtown here where we live, Little Shop of Stories. They even have a little side room that's made to look like Goodnight Moon. Oh! It's so cool. Yeah. I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's really great. And my kid loves going in there and sitting and reading. And they have a beautiful adult selection as well. So that is where we currently are. I mean, there's so many beautiful bookstores. I'm always, I think, going to be in love with Amherst Books, which is the bookstore in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is where I went to grad school and went to so many beautiful readings and discovered all kinds of wonderful things beyond just the poetry that I was focused on. They had a great cognitive linguistics selection. So, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, getting back to the crying book, though, what 3 words would you use to describe this book?
Let's see. Well, I just said spidery, and that often feels right. I think spidery because of making connections, making a web, moving from one spot to another. Constellated, because so many of the words that I came across, the ideas that I came across, the images became, I think, like stars by which I could navigate as I moved through making the work. And communal. I felt very lonely sometimes in my crying and was able to return again and again to friends and books and the books of friends and books that friends would point me towards or just directly calling them on the phone. And so many of their words are contained in these pages as well.
How do you want readers to feel after reading the crying book?
I don't know. I really don't know. I hope that that as they're reading, they feel a sense of unexpected connections emerging, and I hope that the book makes it possible for that kind of activation to continue on. But whatever form those connections take, I would want to be, they're going to be so different for each person. I don't want to overdetermine anything for for anybody.
Heather, thank you so much for coming on the show. The Crying Book will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, November 5th.
Thank you so much.
Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with Heather Christle. She shares more about her inspiration for The Crying Book, how writing a non-fiction book differs from her poetry collections. She also shares her favorite childhood book, her favorite underappreciated novel, and her new projects that she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from FSG Books, The Russian Job, The Forgotten Story of How America Saved the Soviet Union from Ruin by Douglas Smith. An award-winning historian reveals the harrowing, little-known story of an American effort to save the newly formed Soviet Union from disaster. Also from FSG Books, Oblivion Banjo, The Poetry of Charles Wright. Also from FSG Books, 97,196 Words, an essay collection by Emmanuel Carrere, translated by John Lambert. Featuring more than 30 extraordinary texts written over an illustrious 25-year period of creative life, the book shows a remarkable mind at work, spanning continents, histories, and personal relationships. 97,196 words considers the divides between truth, reality, and our shared humanity. New from MCD Books, The Worst Kind of Want by Liska Jacobs. A trip to Italy reignites a woman's desire to disastrous effect in this dark ode to womanhood, death, and sex. New from Grey Wolf Press is In the Dream House, a memoir by Carmen Maria Machado. In the Dream House is Carmen Maria Machado's engrossing and wildly innovative account of a relationship gone bad, and a bold dissection of the mechanisms and cultural representations of psychological abuse. New in paperback from Grey Wolf Press is Space Invaders by Nona Fernandez and Natasha Wimmer. Also new in paperback from Grey Wolf Press is The Colonel's Wife by Rosa Lixum, translated by Lola Rogers. New in paperback from Grey Wolf Press is Heed the Hollow, a poetry collection by Malcolm Tariq. New in paperback from Picador Books is Evening in Paradise by Lucia Berlin. Also new in paperback from Picador is The Best Bad Things by Katrina Carrasco. New in paperback from Picador, Paris Echo by Sebastian Fawkes. New from Henry Holt, Conversations with RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Life, Love, Liberty, and Law by Jeffrey Rosen. This is an intimate look at the life and career of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her own words through an extraordinary series of conversations. New from Forge Books, Tell Me No Lies by Shelley Noble. This is book 2 in a Lady Dunbridge mystery. A modern woman in 1907, Lady Dunbridge is not about to let a little thing like the death of her husband ruin her social life. She's ready to take the dazzling world of the Gilded Age Manhattan by storm. New from Minotaur Books, Blind Search by Paulina Munier. This is book 2 in the Mercy and Elvis mysteries. Inspired by the true search and rescue case of an autistic boy who got lost in the Vermont wilderness, this mystery is a compelling roller coaster ride through the worst of winter and human nature. New from Tor Books, Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade. This is a brand new, genre-bending series from New York Times bestselling author Kel Cade. New in paperback from St. Martin's Griffin is An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. Also new in paperback, The Mayflower, The Families, the Voyage, and the Founding of America by Rebecca Frazier. New from Imprint Books, The Book of Lost Saints by Danielle Jose Older. This is a multi-generational Cuban-American family story of revolution, loss, violence, and family bonds. New from St. Martin's Press, A Marvelous Life, The Amazing Story of Stan Lee by Danny Figueroth. Also new from St. Martin's Press is Jet Girl by Caroline Johnson. Johnson offers an insider's view on the fascinating, thrilling, dangerous, and at times glamorous world of being a naval aviator. New from Harper Books, Finding Chica, A Little Girl, an Earthquake, and the Making of a Family by Mitch Albom. Best-selling author Mitch Albom returns to nonfiction for the first time in more than a decade in this poignant memoir that celebrates Chica, a young Haitian orphan whose short life would forever change his heart. New from Avon Books, Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the first book in the Brown Sisters series. This is a witty, hilarious romantic comedy about a woman who's tired of being boring and recruits her mysterious, sexy neighbor to help her get a life. New from Eco Books, Ball Away by Elizabeth McCracken. This novel is about 3 generations of an unconventional New England family who own and operate a candlepin bowling alley. New from Hanover Square Press, All Blood Runs Red, The Legendary Life of Eugene Bullard Boxer, Pilot, Soldier, Spy by Phil Keith and Tom Clavin. This book shares the incredible life story of Eugene Bullard, the first African-American military pilot to fly in combat, and the only African-American pilot in World War I, who went on to become a self-taught jazz musician, a Paris nightclub impresario, a spy in the French Resistance, and finally, an American civil rights pioneer. New from Harper Paperbacks is Dialogues of the Dead by Reginald Hill, Good Morning, Midnight by Reginald Hill, and Forever and a Day by Anthony Horowitz. New from Harper Perennial, What Are We For? The Worlds and Ideals of Eleanor Roosevelt by Eleanor Roosevelt with a foreword by Nancy Pelosi. New from Harper Perennial is The White Man's Guide to White Male Writers of the Western Canon. And we have the author Dana Schwartz here with us to share all the details. Dana, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on the show. So your new book, it's quite a mouthful, but it will be available on bookshelves this week. How are you feeling?
I am very excited. Yeah, definitely it's a long title. I've been shortening it to The White Man's Guide in shorthand, but I think the title is part of the fun. I think it sort of points out the slight tongue-in-cheek nature of the book. I'm already getting very threatened white men getting very mad at me.
Oh boy. But nonetheless, I'm pretty sure you're excited about it. And yeah, from now on, we're just going to say The White Man's Guide, and I won't get mad at you, and I really don't think my listeners will either.
Thank goodness. I hope people know it's sort of like a parody from a place of love.
Absolutely. So just tell our listeners, tell us about The White Man's Guide, what it's really about, and what inspired you to write it.
So it's based loosely on the Twitter character that I created when I was in college and university called Guy in Your MFA, which was just sort of the prime example of the most pretentious literary bro you can think of. You know, the guy who's condescending, who hates reading female writers, and who thinks, you know, the only way to be a writer is to get, you know, blackout drunk on whiskey. And so I was sort of parodying that trope and using him as a lens to examine the sort of, quote, great white male writers that make up the canon and sort of, you know, investigate each one, look back on his work and his personal life, make plenty of jokes along the way.
How long did it take you to write this book?
Oh, gosh. Well, you know, I would say it took about a year, but it probably took my entire life of having to read so many of these books when I was a student in school, and then through my undergraduate of dealing with all of these white men. And I also want to mention I have a phenomenal illustrator who cartooned all of the men and made original cartoons throughout the book named Jason Katzenstein, who cartoons for The New Yorker, and he's just incredible. It was such a fun process to be able to work with him.
Share with our listeners a favorite excerpt from the book, or a favorite joke, or just something that stands out to you still, so that they can go searching for it and possibly get a good laugh too.
I think maybe one of my favorite illustrations is one that Jason made in the chapter on Ernest Hemingway. I wrote that Ernest Hemingway was born with a full beard and a cable knit sweater. And Jason illustrated a tiny baby with a full beard and a cable knit sweater, and it's just adorable. So the Ernest Hemingway chapter is definitely one of my favorites because he probably embodies so many of the hyper-masculine male writer stereotypes that we think of.
If you didn't write, what would you do for work?
I was actually pre-med in college. I do love anything that involves studying and interacting and helping with people. I think now I realize that I wouldn't make a great doctor for several reasons. But I do love talking and arguing and making arguments. So I think I would have maybe wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay. And when you're not reading or writing, what are you doing?
Oh, well, tweeting, unfortunately, or playing with my cat, Beetlejuice. I adopted a cat last year who's become sort of the love of my life.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So back to books, what would you say is your favorite underappreciated novel? And I know I get a lot of flack for this question, but what I will say as a disclaimer today is if you don't want to classify it as an underappreciated novel, what is a book you want to see more people reading and talking about right now?
You know what? I will say in the United States, more people need to read Ali Smith. I traveled in the UK over the summer and just absolutely fell in love with Ali Smith and saw that she had a claim and prominent position for what I think her work merits. I think in the United States, even sort of the literary community don't celebrate her as much, which is an absolute shame. I think also in terms of underappreciated novels, even if they're not totally abandoned, is I love Shirley Jackson's We've Always Lived in the Castle. I think she's mostly just celebrated, rightfully for the amazing short story, The Lottery, but I wish more people read her novels as well.
Okay. So half of this podcast, while dedicated to all things books and especially new books, but we also love our indie booksellers or indie bookstore owners, and we love everything bookstores. So share with us some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Well, I live in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I absolutely love Book Soup and Skylight Books. New York, where I came from, I would go to Book Culture on the Upper West Side all of the time. Those are probably my three favorites.
But getting back to your book, The White Man's Guide, how do you want readers to feel after picking this book up? Or what reactions are you expecting or hoping for?
Well, I hope they laugh. I hope they find the jokes funny, and I hope they feel like they've learned something. I hope in an ideal world they find the book funny because it's filled with jokes, hopefully. But I also hope they get an expanded perspective on the idea of the canon as it exists. And I hope that people think more critically about the books they've been told to read their entire lives.
Dana, thank you so much for coming on the show. The White Man's Guide to White Male Writers of the Western Canon will be available in bookstores on Tuesday, November 5th.
Thank you so much.
Tune in to our off-the-cuff discussion over on our Patreon page, where I will continue the conversation with Dana Schwartz. She shares what she enjoys writing the most in The White Man's Guide, where she gets most of her writing and work done, her schedule when she's writing, her favorite childhood books, and other projects she's currently working on. So head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder and tune in to the rest of our conversation. New from Harper One, Cozy by Laura Weir. New from William Morrow Paperbacks, The Other Windsor Girl by Georgie Blalock. Also from Morrow Paperbacks, The Poppy Wife by Carolyn Scott. Also new from William Morrow Paperbacks, We Met in December by Rosie Curtis. Following a year in the life of a 20-something American woman who falls hard for her London flatmate, this clever, fun, and unforgettable romantic comedy is a perfect feel-good holiday read. New from Source Books, Do You Know Your Bride? A Quiz About the Woman in Your Life by Dan Kolinsky. Also new from Source Books, Do You Know Your Groom? A Quiz About the Man in Your Life by Dan Kolinsky. These two are wedding quiz books for spouses-to-be. New from Source Books Fire, I Have No Secrets by Penny Jolson. This is a fast-paced and chilling thriller about Gemma, who knows a deadly secret, but because of her cerebral palsy is unable to move or speak. When an experimental treatment gives her a voice, will that make her the killer's next target? New in paperback from Source Books Fire is The Last to Die by Kelly Garrett. A fast-paced, dark YA thriller that explores what happens when a pact that starts out as a game among friends turns into something more deadly. New from Grove Atlantic is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Winner of the 2019 Booker Prize, Girl, Woman, Other is a magnificent portrayal of the intersections of identity among an interconnected group of Black British women. Also from Grove Atlantic is The Finance Curse by Nicholas Sexton. This book explores how the banking sector grew from a supporter of business to the biggest business in the world. Also from Grove Atlantic, The Old Success by Martha Grimes. This is the 25th mystery in the best-selling Richard Drury series. Also from Grove Atlantic is Palm Beach, Mar-a-Lago, and the Rise of the American Zandu by Les Standiford. New in paperback from Grove Atlantic is In the Galway Silence, a Jack Taylor novel by Ken Bruin. Alrighty everyone, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening, and I would like to extend special thanks to Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, Lisa Jewell, Heather Christle, and Dana Schwartz for coming on the show. A list of all the books mentioned in the show will be available over at bibliohappyhour.com. Don't forget to follow Biblio Happy Hour on social media and sign up for newsletters. To shop all the books I've mentioned in the show and to find a bookstore near you or when you're traveling, visit bibliofinder.com. To listen to our off-the-cuff discussions, get our monthly top-shelf new release recommendations, behind-the-scenes content, perks, and more, head on over to patreon.com/bibliofinder. And wherever you're listening, please don't forget to share, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Alrighty everyone, that's it, and I look forward to talking to you in next week's show.